I'm Henny B, and welcome to the World War I Stories podcast, where history comes alive through the voices of those who lived it. Some scenes in these stories may be too graphic for sensitive listeners, so listener discretion is advised. Today's episode, The Call to Fly. Stuck. The lever was stuck. Clyde Roberts' heart pounded in his chest as the ground spun wildly below him. He was committed to the tailspin already, but in order to pull the plane out, he needed the lever unstuck. His Curtiss JN-4 Jenny groaned under the strain, the wind howling past the cockpit. The Curtiss JN-4, or the Jenny, was a marvel of modern engineering, its biplane wings stretching out above and below him, connected by sturdy struts and braced with wires that hummed in the wind. Introduced just a year ago, the plane was already making waves in the aviation community for its reliability and performance. The fuselage, made of wood and fabric, creaked as the plane twisted and turned in the sky. Clyde's tandem cockpit, with its simple controls and open design, offered little protection from the elements, let alone the ground that so furiously approached him. The crowd below had fallen silent, their cheers replaced by gasps of horror as they watched the plane spiral towards the earth. Clyde's hands were slick with sweat as he yanked at the lever, his muscles straining with the effort. He could imagine the excitement turned to fear in the faces of the spectators, their eyes wide as they had expected him to pull up as part of the show. Come on, he muttered through gritted teeth. The lever refused to budge, and the ground was rushing up to meet him at an alarming rate. Clyde's mind raced, searching for a solution. He had been in tight spots before, but this was different. This was life or death. With a sudden burst of determination, he released his grip on the control stick and reached down with both hands, wrenching the lever with all his strength. For a heart-stopping moment, it felt as if the plane would not respond. But then, with a jolt, the lever moved, and Jim pulled back hard on the stick. The Jenny shuddered violently, the tailspin slowing as the nose of the plane began to lift. Clyde's vision blurred from the forges as he fought to regain control. The ground was terrifyingly close now, but the plane was responding, leveling out. He flew low over the heads of the stunned crowd, the roar of the engine drowning out their cheers. Clyde's heart was still racing as he brought the plane around for a final pass, preparing to land on the grassy field below. The crowd erupted into applause, but Clyde barely heard it. He was too focused on the realization that his first air show was almost his last. As he prepared to land the biplane, he reflected on the past 12 years. From witnessing the first flight at Kitty Hawk, hiding behind a bush because he wasn't invited, to his move to Dayton, Ohio to enroll in the Wright Flying School. It had been a remarkable journey. The stark realization that one stuck lever could end it all was both sobering and somewhat scary. A wave of relief washed over him when the plane bounced along the field as he landed. It was a feeling he hadn't had since the first time he ever flew. Since then, his confidence kept him from feeling anything but exhilaration while in a plane. The plane came to a stop. He removed his leather helmet and lifted himself from the cockpit. He was rushed by some ardent onlookers who wanted to pat him on the back. They had no idea how close they had been to witnessing a tragedy. He waved and flashed his customary smile as he walked through the small crowd of onlookers, some of which were now focused on another new aircraft, the British Sopwith Pup, as it did barrel rolls overhead. He noticed a boy, around 10 years old, running in his direction. The boy stopped in front of him and smiled excitedly. "That was swell, mister." "Thanks, kid." He was finding it difficult to match the kid's excitement. "I sure hope you're enjoying the show." His face lit up. "I sure am. I saw the Zeppelins, the balloon, and I even got to sit in a Jenny. I'm going to learn to be a pilot when I grow up. My mama said I could." Clyde tousled the kid's hair. "That's great, kid. We're going to need more pilots for sure." The boy looked past him. "Is that your partner?" Clyde looked back at his plane. He did not recognize the man that was climbing on his plane and looking into the cockpit. "I don't have a partner." "Excuse me, kid." And he walked back towards the plane. The man had climbed down from the cockpit and was now examining the tail of the plane when Clyde approached. "She's quite the machine, isn't she?" The man answered without looking. "Yes, Clyde Roberts, she sure is." "How do you know my name?" The man then turned around. "It's my job to know your name, kid." The man approached him with an outstretched hand. "William Thaw, do you have a minute to talk?" Clyde soon found himself sitting in a diner with Thaw across from him nursing a cup of coffee. "So you're telling me that we, America, have guys flying planes for France in the war? I thought we were neutral." Thaw took a sip of the coffee. "The U.S. is most certainly neutral. All my pilots are there strictly on a volunteer basis, and they're making quite the impact." "And you would like me to volunteer, I'm guessing?" Clyde asked. Thaw grinned. The thought crossed my mind. "You see, we like you stunt flyers. You can perform evasive maneuvers in a tight situation, you have ice in your veins, and more importantly, you take care of your planes." The two men sat talking for the next hour, Clyde asking questions and William Thaw answering them. It seemed to Clyde that Thaw was a no-nonsense man who would not lie. He liked that about him. He learned that Thaw and another man, George Maguire, had worked with the French military to form the Lafayette Escadrille. Its purpose was to handle the influx of American volunteers. He also learned that Escadrille meant a squadron, and that their squadron was named after the Marquis de Lafayette, a French nobleman who played a significant role in the American Revolution. By the end of the conversation, Clyde had said the words, "I'm in." He was going to France. The steamer crawled across the Atlantic Ocean as part of a convoy, taking 3 weeks to reach France. Clyde learned that convoys were common these days, designed to protect the ships from German U-boat attacks. The steamer docked at Bordeaux, where Clyde and Thaw, who had made the trip together, disembarked. From there, they would meet up with a military contingent that would take them to the Epinal airfield in northeastern France, after a brief stop in Paris to complete some necessary paperwork for Clyde. The transport vehicle rumbled through the small town of Epinal, a picturesque place nestled beside the Moselle River. Clyde gazed out the window, taking in the charming streets and the vibrant greenery. Soon, they made their way to the airbase that would be his home for the next year. "Well, at least the scenery's pretty," he remarked. "Come on, Clyde. There's no way this is prettier than New Jersey," Thaw joked, a grin spreading across his face. Clyde chuckled, glancing at the lush, rolling hills surrounding them. "You're right. What was I thinking?" Thaw led Clyde to a cabin that stood apart from the bustling support staff quarters. Inside, he found a bed, a chest of drawers, and a wardrobe. "A cabin? I assumed I'd be in some sort of dormitory," Clyde said, surprised. "The dorms are for the support staff," Thaw explained, gesturing around. "We've got plenty of that. We need our pilots well-rested and clear-headed. Individual cabins are what's best for the pilots and the brass." He pointed towards the wardrobe. "Try on your flight suit and meet me in the meeting room in half an hour. Just ask someone for directions. They'll point it out." Clyde walked over to the wardrobe and opened it, revealing 3 neatly pressed uniforms and a leather helmet. "Will do, sir," he replied. He walked into the meeting room 5 minutes late. Even with directions, he had trouble finding it. The room had a long rectangular table with 3 chairs on either side and one at each end. All but one seat was taken. Clyde walked to it and sat down. "Sorry I'm late." Thaw nodded his approval and addressed the room. "Men, may I present to you Clyde Roberts. Found him in an air show in New Jersey. He almost splattered on the ground when a lever stuck in his Jenny. Couldn't get out of what should have been a controlled tailspin." Clyde looked over at him in awe. How did he know the lever got stuck? How did he know that he didn't have control? Clyde had never told him. Thaw had an all-knowing look on his face as he looked over at Clyde. "I notice everything about flying, Clyde. And yes, I noticed that." The jovial Thaw that Clyde had come to know during his journey was gone. He was all business now. "Around this table are some of the best pilots you can find. I'd like to introduce them." Thaw pointed to the first pilot on his left and began his introductions. This is James O'Sullivan from Providence, Rhode Island, Henry Thompson from Springfield, Missouri, Charles Beaumont from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Richard Lawson from San Francisco, and Thomas Delacroix, our resident French pilot. We also have Eugene Bullard from Columbus, Georgia, and finally, Raoul Lufberry from Champlain, New York. Clyde was in shock. He had heard of Raoul Lufberry. Lufberry? You're famous in the States. Wow, I didn't know you were here. Lufberry let out a giggle and smiled. I'm here, kid. Thaw officially called the meeting to order. Clyde, this squad does reconnaissance. Our job is to fly high and note enemy positions and movement. We report them back here where those movements are radioed back to command. Sometimes we run bombing raids. But son, our primary responsibility is to keep the troops on the ground safe. We dogfight in this squad. Clyde looked confused. Dogfight, sir? Air-to-air combat, son. When we go up, some poor German son of a bitch is going down. This made the men around the table laugh and cheer slightly. Clyde looked around the table. I've never been in a fight on the ground, let alone the air, sir. I'm aware of that. Don't worry, we brought you here to strictly fly reconnaissance. When you go up, others, fighters, will go with you. You'll be flying a Brigade 14. You ever fly one of those, son? Thaw asked. Clyde shook his head. No, sir, just flew the Jenny. Thaw glanced at Lufberry. Similar, right? Similar enough. Lufberry turned his attention to Clyde. It's a plane we use solely for bombing and reconnaissance. Won't be too hard for you to learn. Good enough for me, sir. The meeting adjourned about an hour later. Thaw and Lufberry had gone over some crucial details for the next day's mission. Reports had come in about a new German trench position near the Somme River. They were to gather as much intelligence as they could and bomb it if spotted. Clyde barely slept that night, his mind racing with thoughts of the mission ahead and his body an uncontrollable bundle of nerves, each twitch and flutter amplifying his anxiety. Earlier that evening, he had taken a moment to inspect the Brigade 14 that would be his steed in the skies. The aircraft stood proudly on the tarmac, its sleek lines illuminated by the soft glow of the hangar lights. Clyde noted the similarities to the Jennies he had flown back home, the familiar layout of the cockpit, the arrangement of the controls, and the reassuring feel of the yoke in his hands. As he settled into the pilot's seat, a flicker of comfort washed over him. The Brigade's controls were responsive, and the instruments glinted in the dim light, each dial and gauge promising a world of possibilities. He ran his fingers over the throttle and the mixture control, recalling the lessons learned during his training. The sensation of the leather seat beneath him and the cold metal of the control stick brought back memories of simpler days, soaring over the fields of home. As he finally drifted off to sleep, he could faintly hear the cheers of the air show crowd back in New Jersey, their excitement echoing in his mind. He envisioned that kid in his little newsboy hat, kneeling by his bed, praying for his safety. The early morning sun was still below the horizon when Clyde was jolted awake by Charles Beaumont. Time to get ready, Rook. Clyde rubbed his eyes, struggling to shake off the remnants of sleep. Already? It's still dark. Dark now, sure, but it won't be when we get where we're going. Suit up. Charles stood by the door, arms crossed, waiting for him. Clyde jumped up and quickly dressed. Once ready, he and Charles left the cabin and headed towards the tarmac. I'm going with you. You fly, I write and take notes. If there's any trouble, you evade and I shoot. Understood? Clyde nodded, a mix of excitement and apprehension swirling in his gut. What are the chances that there's trouble? I can't say. There's been a lot of fighting near the Somme lately, but I've never been there. None of us have. You nervous? Clyde tried to mask his true emotions. No way. I'm excited. Charles stopped him, grabbing him by the shoulders. Look, kid, we all need you to be nervous. We all need you to be scared. When we're scared and nervous, we pay attention and we make fewer mistakes. He released Clyde and continued on his way. Clyde sprinted to catch up with him, his heart racing. Of course I'm nervous and scared. Good, 'cause I don't want to die today, Charles shot back. The two men hopped in their designated plane, Clyde in the pilot's seat and George behind him. The men were seated back to back in the plane, with Charles in a position to man the rear-facing machine gun that was mounted on the aircraft. They waited in line as 3 other aircraft took flight before them. Then it was their turn. The engine roared to life and the plane taxied down the dirt road. Clyde pulled up on the control and the nose of the plane pointed upwards and into the air. 4 hours later, the planes made a safe return. The mission had been uneventful. Notes and drawings were effectively made with no disturbances by German aircraft. Lufbery made it clear to Clyde that they were fortunate. Later that evening, after dinner, Clyde sought out Thaw, who was standing on the tarmac inspecting the aircraft. "Sir, I gained some valuable experience today, which was great, but I'd like to go up again, just to fly around here tonight before the sun goes down. Is that okay?" Thaw looked Clyde over, skepticism etched on his face. "Are you being serious?" "Yes, sir." Clyde stood tall, determination in his posture. "It's a new plane for me, and I got pretty comfortable in her this morning. I just want to get to know her a little better, that's all." Thaw pondered for a moment, weighing the request. "I guess it couldn't hurt. Just don't go more than 10 miles from the airfield. We aren't the only ones doing surveillance." Clyde started to make his way to the plane. "Thank you, sir." He climbed into the cockpit, excitement bubbling within him. Thaw approached the plane, catching Clyde's attention as he checked his instruments. "Here, just in case." He held out a pistol. Clyde took the pistol and held it in front of his face, uncertainty creeping in. "I've never shot one of these, sir." "Just aim for the fuel tank, or the pilot if you're feeling bold." Thaw climbed down and backed away as Clyde started the engine of the plane. Clyde lowered his goggles over his eyes and pushed the controls forward. As the plane began to taxi down the dirt road, a wave of comfort washed over him. The rhythmic bounce of the wheels against the uneven surface and the exhilarating moment of liftoff always calmed his nerves. Once he reached an altitude of 5,000 feet, he stabilized the plane, feeling the familiar hum of the engine beneath him. He planned to fly in circles around the airfield for about an hour, savoring the freedom of the open sky and getting to know his plane. He had been in the air 20 minutes when a sudden ping echoed off the side of the aircraft, a sound he was unfamiliar with. Clyde glanced to his left, and to his horror, he saw another aircraft about a mile away. The pilot was shooting at him. He pulled up on the controls, quickly gaining altitude, but the enemy plane mirrored his movements. Another ping rang out from the enemy's gun, and this time he felt a jolt as a bullet struck the tail of his aircraft. Clyde's heart raced. He knew he was in grave danger. This pilot was not like him. He was likely seasoned and a trained marksman, 2 things Clyde was not. Instinct kicked in before panic could take hold. Clyde recalled the air shows he had performed where he had mastered a variety of aerial tricks. One thing he had that this pilot likely did not was experience in maneuvering through the skies with agility and flair, and he was willing to bet on that. He nose-dived into a tailspin, hoping that this would give the enemy pilot a false sense of security, the sense that he had scored a direct hit and that Clyde's aircraft was going down. Unlike the Jenny, the controls of the Brigade 14 did not get stuck. He reached 1,000 feet and corrected himself. He searched the sky for the enemy pilot, and just as he had hoped, the ruse had worked. The enemy pilot was flying away from him. He quickly turned the plane in the opposite direction and headed back towards the airfield. A few minutes later, another ping rocked the plane. He looked back and saw the enemy plane. The enemy pilot must have looked back, saw that he had recovered, and given chase. Clyde grabbed the pistol and the controls. He yanked back violently, sending the plane shooting upwards. In an instant, he found himself upside down, just above the enemy plane. With both hands on the controls and the upper wings obstructing his view, he couldn't take a shot. Instead, he maintained his momentum, maneuvering until he was directly behind the enemy aircraft. Letting go of the controls to straighten out his plane, he raised the pistol and fired 6 shots in quick succession from his rear vantage point. A wisp of smoke curled from the side of the enemy craft, and he watched in satisfaction as it began to descend. He watched as the enemy plane hit the ground in a flurry of dust. He was surprised there was no explosion. A few seconds later, the sound wave caught up to him, and he heard the crunching of metal and canvas hitting the ground. It was then that he was hit with something he did not expect. An overwhelming wave of guilt. Did he just kill a man? Clyde eased the controls to his left and gradually made a circle around the site where the German plane had crashed. He continued to look down in an attempt to spot any movement. Any movement would make him feel better. He circled 4 times before he decided to set his plane down near the site and investigate. When the plane finally came to a stop, he quickly removed his goggles and helmet, undid his restraint, and jumped out of the cockpit. He wanted to run to the crash site, but found that his body would not let him, or was it his mind? He approached cautiously, knowing that the pilot, if alive, was probably armed. The closer he got, the more he could smell. The petrol, the oil, and something else. Was it death? He stood near the wreckage, staring into the cockpit, looking at the man who lay completely still. Throwing caution to the wind, he knelt down and removed the man's helmet. He was young, like himself, couldn't be more than 22 years old. He gently set the man's helmet on the ground next to him. When he looked back, the man's eyes were open. Clyde screamed in fear and scurried backwards, falling on his backside as he did so. The man said something in German. Clyde could see tears starting to stream down his dirt-marked face. He rocked forward onto his knees and started towards the man. The man held out both hands to Clyde. He was unarmed. Moving quickly, Clyde rushed to the plane and started to undo the man's restraints. When that was done, he stood and started to pull the man from the wreckage. Once freed from the wreckage, Clyde fell backwards onto his backside. He maneuvered to his knees once again and took the man's head into his lap. He heard the voice before he felt the shake. "Roberts! Roberts! Are you hurt?" He looked up to see Thaw, Beaumont, and Lufbury illuminated by the headlights of a transport vehicle. He had not realized how dark it had gotten. He looked down at the dead man still laying in his lap, then turned his tear-soaked eyes to the dark sky and let out an anguished scream.
This has been World War I Stories. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the show wherever you found this podcast, and don't forget to throw us a rating. Join our Facebook community by searching and liking the official World War I Stories page. You can also join me on Blue Sky, where I go by the handle WW1Stories_NEB. World War I Stories is now featured on Rabbit in Red Radio, with new episodes streaming Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. They also have all episodes available on demand. Visit rabbitinredradio.com for this and many other independent podcasts. And last but not least, would you like your name read on the show? Become a producer by contributing to our Patreon at patreon.com/World War I Stories. I'm very grateful to everyone who downloads and listens to this show. I'm Henny B, and I'll see you next time on World War I Stories.